welcome to yet another episode of the Industry Leaders podcast with myself, Kim Leggett, and my partner in crime, Dane McDonald. On today's episode, we have a super special guest. He is probably one of the most recognizable and influential health and fitness professionals today. We are actually welcoming Layne Norton to the podcast. And Dane, you actually know Layne personally, don't you, as well? You go way back.
Yeah, well, we've got we've got a bit of living up to, because he's been on the Joe Rogan podcast before and a few things like that. But
right.
yeah, look, I've known Layne for several years. Initially, actually, when we met because I guess we had kind of opposing views on how you should train clients and feed them and things like this. This was about 8 years ago, and I remember at the time, I said to Layne, I said to him, like, look, I know you don't necessarily agree with some of the stuff that I'm doing, but why don't you come to my gym in the city of Sydney and check out what we do? I think I said you'd be pleasantly surprised with the results that we're getting and what we're doing there. So
yeah,
he ended up coming in. We met. He obviously saw all the amazing results people were getting, and he was like, look, we've got different views, but you're clearly getting results. So we kind of forged a friendship from that standpoint. And from then, and look, we've kept in touch ever since. Obviously, we partnered up just over a year ago to bring his education courses exclusively to the market globally with the science of nutrition and training the physique athlete. And we've got a few other big things in store this year, but I'll let him kind of, spill the beans on all that. But yeah, look, great guy, got a lot of respect for him. He's controversial at times and can turn a lot of people off, but I've the same has been said of me over the years. And I think, one thing I respect about him is he's a man of conviction and he stands by what he believes in. And I think
100%.
that comes across in everything that he puts out there within the industry. I
absolutely agree. And I actually think I'm probably going to fangirl a little bit, because Layne Norton is one of those people in the fitness industry that I actually messaged or replied or commented on Facebook once. This is years ago, about metabolic damage. I was one of those people. I was team metabolic damage. Please help me.
Yeah.
And I actually screenshot when he replied. I thought I was a superstar. I was like, Layne Norton has replied to me. And here I am talking to him on a podcast now with you. So like, it's actually strange, but 10 years in the making. And I'm actually going to be talking to him on the podcast. So it's actually amazing. So excited.
It comes full circle. Well, look, let's get him on. Let's get into it and get into the interview.
Sounds good. Let's bring him on. All right, guys. Well, we have Layne Norton joining us today. Thanks for joining us, Layne. We appreciate your time today talking to us.
No problem. Thank you guys for having me on.
Now, look, Dane goes way back with you. I literally just sort of admitted that I'm a fangirl of yours. I'm going to do a little bit of a spiel about you. So just sit back and just like bathe in it. For the people that don't know you, Layne Norton holds a Bachelor of Biochem and has a PhD in nutritional sciences. He's an athlete himself. He has had a successful career as both a professional powerlifter, has competed at the World Championships, and is also a nationally acclaimed pro bodybuilder. He is also a part of the Clean Health family on the academic advisory board. He's published numerous research papers and scientific journals, been on the Joe Rogan podcast, bodybuilding.com, et cetera, et cetera. So he is a man who knows what he's talking about. I've done a little bit of a spiel there, but to the people that do not know you, Layne, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get started in the industry?
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. Basically, Dane and I we were just talking about how I've been in this industry 20 years now. And I remember when I was the punk kid that had all these ideas that everybody thought was crazy. So I originally got into weightlifting because I was bullied pretty badly when I was a kid, didn't get any attention from girls. And I joke that I started weightlifting to stop getting bullied and get attention from girls. And it didn't accomplish either of those tasks, but fortunately, I fell in love with the process of lifting weights, fell in love with the gym, and that started the longest love affair of my life, which is myself and resistance training. And I'd always wanted to be a shark biologist when I was a kid, and that actually even until even until my adult years, that's what I wanted to do. And I grew up in the middle of the country in Indiana, so not a whole lot of sharks in Indiana. And I wanted to go to Florida to study that. And the place where I decided to go to study that was Eckerd College in St. Petersburg, Florida. And when I got there, one of the advisors convinced me to do a biology degree instead, and then said, if you want to go do marine science as a graduate degree, do it then, because biology, like, you might change your mind. Biology is a lot broader, you know. And then my first year there, I was getting really into bodybuilding. I was going to plan to do my first show, and just really interested in the human body, and was already kind of thinking, oh, maybe this is the thing. Maybe this is actually, maybe I'm more about this than, you know, stuff that can bite me.
Yeah.
And my chemistry professor at the time, Dr. Schnabel, I still keep in contact with him actually. He said, you know what, Layne, you don't want to do biology. You actually want to do biochemistry, because if you finish your degree here and you don't go to grad school as a biology major, you're just going to look like a med school student who didn't make it into med school. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll do biochemistry then. And very thankful I did that, because I learned a ton from doing biochemistry. I think it really set me up very well to go into nutritional sciences, which is what I did in graduate school. Now, while I was an undergrad, I guess you could say this is where I got into the industry. After I finished my first show, I started posting on the bodybuilding.com forums. I'm going to date myself. This is circa 2001. And so they had a message board, one of the only ones on the internet. And I started posting there, and I kind of got a reputation as somebody who knew what they were talking about. And one of the other people there, who actually, funny enough, we just had him on our podcast last week, because he's gone on to be a professor of exercise science. His screen name was Big Red. His real name is Jay Kaliva. But he had said to me, he wrote for bodybuilding.com at the time, and he said, you know, you really ought to like send an inquiry about being a writer for the site. And I was like, oh, they wouldn't want me, you know. Now, come to find out, they needed writers. And so I started writing for them. I sent an inquiry. They said, sure, yeah. And, you know, I was getting $25 store credit for per 1,000-word article. And I could not have been more thrilled about that as a 20-year-old kid. And started doing that and developed a relationship with them. And that kind of just jumping forward, finished my PhD, got a pro card in bodybuilding, had success in powerlifting, you know, world championships, all that kind of stuff. And along the way, bodybuilding.com was kind of a big springboard for me, because they reached so many people. So a lot of people got to see my material. And I think also I was a very early adopter of social media. Like, I was on MySpace in like 2004. I was on Facebook in 2006. Instagram, I think in like 2000.
I reckon about 90% of our listeners don't even know what MySpace is.
Yeah.
MySpace is dead now.
Yeah. So anyway, so I always try to put myself out in front of people, you know, put a lot of content out. And I have a lot of people ask me like, man, where do I get to where you're at? And I'm like, well, here's what I did: make 100,000 posts on different bodybuilding forums over a 10-year period, answer about 250,000 emails you'll never get paid for, write, you know, hundreds of articles essentially for free, do over 1,000 videos for free, and you'll probably build a pretty decent following, and then you can start to monetize it, you know, a decade later.
As you were saying all of that, I think one of the big messages or take homes I took away from it was just perseverance and grit. You know, anyone that has, you know, might be introduced to you now just sees all the bells and whistles. They haven't seen when you were doing articles for free. They haven't seen when you were getting $25 store credit from bodybuilding.com 18, 19 years ago. And I think it kind of ties into a question I had is, obviously for fitness professionals that are out there in the industry today, right? There's so much conflicting information. There's conflicting information on where they should, you know, even start their career, where they should do their course, what they should learn, all of that in between. Like for you, you know, being an OG now in the industry, like what would be some of your kind of bits of advice or mentoring to young fitness professionals out there that are just kind of at the start of their career? You know, what would you say?
Great question. And honestly, finding the right people to follow is so critical, because even like me, for example, somebody asked me a question the other day about pediatric nutrition. I said, I really am not the guy to ask that. You know, even though I got a PhD in nutritional sciences, that's not my wheelhouse. I have a very small comfort zone that I feel, you know, very comfortable talking about. And outside of that, even in nutrition, like if somebody asks me a question about, you know, vitamin D metabolism, I'm going to be like, I'm going to ask my friend who's an expert. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think what
So
that shows is that, you know, even just that part there, the whole ego thing, right? A lot of people like try and take on all this stuff and try and profess to be more than they are. You know, what you just showed there is obviously referring out, knowing your limits and knowing your lanes, and referring out when you feel it's appropriate.
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to that as I talk about how to know who to follow. So if you're not going to go do your own PhD or masters or whatever, and you kind of almost have to find people you trust who are good to follow, who can point you in the direction of the good stuff, right? Because we see people who get into information silos or echo chambers where, you know, they just become very dogmatic about what they talk about.
Yep.
It's very difficult because Greg Nuckols made a really good comment on my podcast years ago that I still remember to this day. He said, you know, a person is very good when they talk to someone at knowing pretty quickly whether or not that person has more knowledge than them about a topic or not, right?
Yeah.
So if we talk about something, like it'll be very apparent, you know, within a few minutes, okay, this person knows more about this topic than me, about the same or less, right?
Yeah.
What we're terrible at being able to determine is if two people have more knowledge than us on a topic, who is the more knowledgeable of the two? That is extremely hard to differentiate for us because we don't know. And that's why people get so confused. They say, well, this person says this and this person says this.
I think
and this
especially in
this.
the fitness industry, because you've got big personalities, big presences, and sometimes charisma will overshine knowledge.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
And you know, when you have that come in, that's when you get, you know, the guruism silos and things like that. And we've all fallen prey to it or seen it around, you know, over the years. But it's I think the fitness industry is harder than a lot of others too when it comes to this.
Yeah, and it's tough because even like I would love to be able to say, well, just follow people with the credentials, you know, follow registered dietitians, follow people with PhDs. But listen, it's all about confidence levels, right? So somebody's like, oh, are you saying that only PhDs know what they're talking about? No, I've met people with bachelor's degrees or less who were very knowledgeable in the topic. But if all things are equal and one person has a PhD and one person doesn't have any degree, do I have more confidence that they probably know what they're talking about? Yes. But I've also seen PhDs make really, really dumb statements. And unfortunately, the way something like cognitive dissonance works, where you're not willing to acknowledge, you know, anything outside your own belief system, people who are really intelligent actually tend to have worse cognitive dissonance because they use their own intelligence as justification for why they must be right because they're smart. So that can be very tricky.
I think you see that with a lot of, you know, I call them SMEs, subject matter experts. And I think, you know, what comes with that sometimes is, you know, they're so used to getting the accolades of you're great at this, you're great at this. And it kind of, you integrate that with ego. And then that's sometimes when you can have a bit of an issue with this. And I think, you know, like you touched on a good point. I think there's a lot of people out there that even, you know, for example, might have a doctorate or might have a master's degree, but potentially they got it from a university whose curriculum was questionable, or they got it they've got the qualification, they use that as a badge to talk about something else that's outside of their lane. That's
a great example of that is there's actually, you can go look this up. It's called Nobel Prize syndrome. So of the people who have won Nobel Prizes, this is a real thing. People who have won Nobel Prizes in like what's considered hard sciences, like chemistry, mathematics, whatnot, a good portion of them believe in some kind of quackery by the end of their lives. The gal that discovered Marie Curie, who kind of like was a huge like breakthrough in radiation, I think she like believed like healing crystals by the end of her life. Like Linus Pauling, who won a Nobel Prize in chemistry, believed that ultra high dose vitamin C could like cure almost all diseases. Now the problem is, just because you're an expert in one area of science does not translate to other areas. That is not always the case. And like people have, like during this COVID epidemic, people ask me my opinion all the time. And I'm like, here's what the experts say. Because I don't know. I'm not an immunologist. I'm not a virologist.
Exactly.
I have a basic understanding of that kind of stuff. But like, I mean, I can read the papers and kind of understand it, you know? But like
I,
these
I
people who are
always
holding
say, like, when trainers have asked me over the years, I'm like, you know what, pick an area that you want to learn more about. So if it's training general population clients, if it's training physique athletes, if it's getting athletes strong, and then focus on that lane. You know, don't try and become an expert at 5 things, because you know what, even if you're Albert fucking Einstein, you're not. We only have a certain capacity as human beings to master 2, maybe 3 things, but 1 to 2 things at best.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, I tell people, like, people ask me about training, a lot, and consider me a training expert, but I don't consider myself a training expert. I consider myself, I think I can discuss it and be good. I would not consider myself an expert. And I'll always, so this leads me into, how do you know who to follow? So credentials can help. The biggest thing is, do they have a narrative they're always pushing? That's one thing. Like, is it always, does it seem like there's one solution to every problem? Is it like a hammer looking for a nail, right? So that's a big one. Another one is, do they say things frequently like best, worst, always, never, like superlatives like that? Most real researchers don't use those kind of words. What you'll hear, I used to do, a seminar series called a VIP Camp. I actually took one to Australia back in 2014. And I made it a point to point out that when people would ask questions, I'm like, notice what you hear a lot of. What you hear a lot of, we think based on the data suggests, possibly, maybe, and the magic words, I don't know. If you never hear somebody say to any question, I don't know, that person is a charlatan. Almost 100%, you can guarantee it. Okay. So it's funny. People will think I'm arrogant because I'm very direct online, and I don't sugarcoat things, but that is very different from an arrogance. One of the reasons I'm so, I go after charlatans is because I know how difficult it is to be good at even one thing. And then I'll look at, say a chiropractor who's pushing some nonsensical diet, and people go, well, he's a doctor. I'm like, pump the brakes. Okay. Like, he would have zero schooling in this.
He has a badge.
Right. He has zero schooling in this, So the magic words are, I don't know. And I tell that every seminar I do, I tell people, I'm like, you are going to hear me say the 3 magic words at some point. I don't know. And that's because,
and I think that's because
that's because I got crushed so many times as a graduate student, because I would make a claim and then, somebody would push it back on me. And I actually had the experience of pretty much getting destroyed in front of a room full of scientists as a graduate student by another professor when I was giving a presentation where he was, pointing out things that I couldn't support with data. And it was very painful at the time. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I would like to find that guy and actually write him a thank you note. Because it just made me realize, if you aren't sure and you don't know it, don't make a big claim.
I think that's why a lot of people love you, Layne, is because you cut through the BS and you're not afraid to put people on show. You're not afraid to say, you don't know what the hell you're talking about, or that's not your field, And right. I guess the biggest sort of most recent example of that I can think of, and I'm not trying to put you on show here, but it's more that when you had that beef with Jillian Michaels about protein consumption, you're probably going to roll your eyes here, but it's interesting because you used scientific data and your expertise to actually shut her down. So I guess in a way, can you explain why do you think people like that, who I guess to the layman seems like an expert in the field, feels like they can talk about a certain area, and why do you feel like it's important to also put them in their place, like the way that
I think just on that though, celebrity trainers are some of the worst.
I agree.
When it comes to this, whether it's domestic here or internationally, because they've been given the stamp of approval by, television, and then that's when you get even bigger.
And really,
issues.
I'm not a Jillian Michaels expert, so I don't know about her, all her credentials and all that kind of stuff. But really, all it takes to be a celebrity trader is just one celebrity saying, "Wow, this person got me in great shape," and then you're just going to have tons of people that follow that. that tends to be a kind of good old boy circle, unfortunately. You know, they tend to only run with people who have trained with other celebrities.
And yeah, I'm not saying all are horrendous either. I think that's
Sure.
a distinction to make, but definitely, like, I think, you know, coming back to what you said about who do you follow, you know, a lot of people would be just following a celebrity trainer because they coach their favorite TV star to get into shape.
And I gotta give some props. Actually, there are a few that follow me now. Like there's a guy, his first name's Magnus, I think, and he trained Gal Gadot for Wonder Woman.
Okay.
And then Gunnar Peterson, who trains the LA Lakers, he actually follows me and actually interacts with me quite frequently. So it's good that like those people are starting to follow, you know, experts in the field, because you're right. One of the things you would hear a lot, and this is even true in the fitness industry, is, well, the results don't lie. Look at all the champions I've had. Okay. That means nothing. Really, getting somebody who's genetically elite, sometimes these coaches get results in spite of what they do. Or there was a really good, I forget who said the quote, but basically they said, you know, one thing that these coaching mills have, where these trainers have like lots of clients and they produce champions, is only the genetic elites can survive the things they're having them do and still make progress. And so these people would have made progress no matter what. Now, you don't ever hear from the people who got destroyed by whatever that coach was doing. And I always tell people, I'm like, don't show me the person who took somebody who's genetically elite and got him to be a champion. I don't care about that. Show me somebody who took somebody who was, you know, just skinny fat or just pretty awful genetics and got them to be okay. You know, that's what I'm interested in, you know.
And I'd add another layer to that too, in that do it again and again.
Right. Sure. Repeatability.
You know, just doing it for 1 year or for one round of clients is one thing, but when you can consistently do it, you know, year after year after year, you know, then that's one thing I've always looked at and say, okay, well, what is the academic background, and then how have they applied that?
Sure.
You know,
sure. And those are two different things. Yep.
Yeah, and have they been able to apply that consistently and safely, not just a you know one hit wonder.
Somebody exactly. And a lot of things will produce results for a lot of people. But you know, I do this argument all the time. I'll say, somebody said, well, this worked. I'm like, that's great. Anything will work to a certain degree. The question is, you know, how close to, you know, the theoretical optimal are we getting, right? Like for that person's particular situation, their goals. You know, it's funny, people make a big deal out of like individualization. And when they talk about individualization, usually what people are thinking of is, oh, I'm a unique unicorn and my metabolism and the way I'm put together is totally different. And in reality, the uniqueness probably has more to do with psychology than it does physiology.
Good point.
So kind of talking about that in terms of, you know, some of the stuff that you've done over the years, like what is one thing in recent times that you feel science has helped to kind of set the records straight within the fitness industry? You know, so for example, you know, calories in, calories out, metabolic damage, like, or is this something that's constantly evolving? Like, talk to us about some of the stuff that you've kind of feel that you've dispelled the myth on over the last few years, and some of the stuff that you're looking into at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think things are always evolving, and I think that nothing is ever truly put to rest, because just when you think that somebody can't make an insane claim, here they come. I mean, there was a guy a couple of years ago who I did a video on who was claiming that egg whites make you fat. You know, like, it's like, God, what's next? You know, like, of all the things, egg whites. Yeah, that's just all those obese people who just claim, you know, they just can't stop eating egg whites, you know. So, you know, I don't think anything's ever truly put to rest, but I think some of the things that clear up confusion is, you know, when it comes to, one of the things I'm really focused on now is energy balance and trying to make it more palatable to the average person in terms of calories in, calories out. When we say calories in, calories out, we're talking about a law of physics and a physiological process. People mistake that for measurements and calorie budgeting, right? They say, well, I ate 1,500 calories a day. And on my Fitbit, it says I burned 1,000 calories per day. And, this is what this online calculator said my, daily energy expenditure is. So I should be losing X. And it's like, you are confusing a physiological process for a method. Okay. Tracking calories is a method. So, people say, well, I lost weight without tracking calories. Like it somehow invalidates energy balance. And it's like, that's great. You can save money without having a budget. But a budget will help a lot of people save money, right? It's just a tool in the toolbox, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And I really like using financial examples because I feel like it makes a little more intuitive sense to people. Yeah. So it's like people will say something, well, I just cut out carbs and I lost weight. Well, that's great. If you just take every paycheck and immediately take, $1,000 of it and put it in savings and never touch it, guess what? You'll save money. Maybe you didn't keep a budget, but what you were doing was you took away $1,000. You knew it wasn't there anymore. And so you spent less, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
What happens? You take away carbs, you cut out a food group, you eat less, right? So I have no problem with how anybody chooses to lose weight. I think that there is if you look at the scientific data and just look around, we have millions of examples of people who have lost weight every which way, right? People have lost weight on a high carb diet. People lost weight on a low carb diet. People lost weight, plant-based diet, Mediterranean diet, whatever you want to do. People have found a way to lose weight and feel healthier. What matters is, one, how that's promoted. Like, let's just be honest about why it works, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, what I've found a lot of is people kind of they find what worked for them. And when I say work for them, mostly just something that they were able to adhere to. And here's the catch. What felt least restrictive for them, what feels least restrictive for an individual is individual. So for me, for example, that was flexible dieting. If you tell me that I can eat whatever I want, as long as I budget for it and, control my portions and track things, I got very lean this past year. Did a photo shoot and asked my wife. She was disgusted by how easy it was for me. She was like, she's like, you haven't even complained about it. Now, by the end, I did start getting a little irritable. But as far as like energy and like cravings, like I had no problems. I did not have a day where I wasn't compliant. So,
and I think that approach, that word you just used then, compliance, you can't out eat a bad diet. Right. So, like in terms of, you might have the greatest diet plan in the world, but if you're actually not doing it and setting it up in a way where it's going to promote compliance, whether it's with yourself or clients, it's useless.
And people really overestimate what they can be compliant to. They'll come up with like a rigid meal plan or a low carb or whatever. They'll say, I'll stick to this. And they will, as long as everything else in their life is going well, right? As long as their schedule doesn't get thrown off, as long as they don't have any stress. That's why I tell people, I'm like, when do people blow their diets? It's not at, 8 a.m. in the morning after they've had a full night of sleep and, it's quiet and things are good and they don't have a lot of stress and they're in their regular schedule. No, it's when they're sleep deprived, the kids are driving them crazy, screaming at, 6 p.m. at night, and there's a bunch of hyperpalatable foods that are available, right? That's when it goes to crap. So really, I tell people, like, you ought to work backwards from what feels least restrictive to you. So for me, that's flexible dieting. But for other people, it's different. Like some people, tracking actually gives them quite a bit of anxiety. So maybe for them, it was low carb. Maybe for them, it was intermittent fasting. I don't care. What I'm saying is, let's be honest about why they work. But what happens is people find what works for them, develop an identity with it, and then try to, can I curse on this? Is that okay?
Of course.
You can curse away.
You're Aussie, so I figured you're cool with it. But so what they'll try to do is retroactively do fuckery with the science in order to justify that what they did was physiologically the best thing, because it's not good. It's almost like if you tell them the real science of like, well, it's not really better than anything else. But if you like, it's like they found out their team.
Simple.
It's like they found out their team tied for the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? And they're like, we can't have a tie. This has to be the best thing, because it was so easy for them. And since we always view things through the prism of our own lens, we have trouble stepping outside of that and being somebody else's shoes.
And I think that's super important because, like, most of our listeners right now are PTs and fitness professionals. And I remember a quote I got from an industry colleague of mine many years ago. At the time, I think I was 28 and he was about my age now, 38. And he was like, Dane, what do you think the average age of a PT is? I'm like, oh, I don't know. Mid-20s is like, it's, 24.5 years old. I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm above average. I'm like, fuck, that makes you a dinosaur, mate, at 38. And he laughed and he's like, yes, but mark my words, Dane, when you're 38, the average age of PTs is not going to be 38. It's still going to be 24.5 or even younger. And so, what I'm saying there is, if you look at a lot of the coaches that are giving advice to clients, they're looking at it through the prism of their age and experience in life as someone in their mid-20s. Now, when I was in my mid-20s, no mortgage, no business, no kids, no wife. I could do whatever the fuck I wanted whenever I wanted.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, why can't you stick to this? Yeah.
I could eat 5,000 calories a day and stay in shape because I was doing 25,000 steps a day as a PT, doing 50 sessions a week. And I could do whatever. So cool, that worked for me, but that was not going to work for the majority of PT's clients. Let's just say they're 35 to 50 years old, their parents, they're, again, because it's a luxury, not a necessity, there may be a manager or a business owner. So they've got the business stress, they've got the wife or the husband stress, they've got the kid stress. The average client that coaches are working with are not set up to follow strict guidelines and parameters that you yourself as a fitness professional might be doing to get shredded, bro. You know what I mean? So this is I think what you said there is super important, because taking yourself outside of the context of you and where you're at and trying to transplant that into someone who's at a very different stage of their life. Like, when you were talking about the last year, you've done the flexible dieting to get into shape. And by the way, great photo shoot and great results, mate. Like, inspiring. But I think
I still got it.
Yeah. And I think, big thing with that is, like, realistically, with your work stress, with your family stress, with all the type of stuff that you've got on a day-to-day, if someone was to say to you, Layne, I want you to go on some sort of low carb or some whatever type of system to get into shape, even if you wanted to, it's probably not realistic due to the emotional ebbs and flows of life.
Yeah. Or, I mean, the other thing is, like, I don't want the experience of, like, my daughter says, can we go get ice cream? And then, like, me not being able to enjoy that with them, like, that's like, well, we can go get keto ice cream, kids, like, so. But again, the experience when I was, like you said, Dane, when I was in my early 20s and I started coaching people when I was 23 years old online, 2005. I think probably one of the first people to really do it online. Yep. I just was like, well, this is very simple. Here are these numbers. Eat this, you'll get the results. And it's kind of like,
why aren't you doing that? Well, because my kid kept me up all night. And just still do it.
Exactly. Just do it. Yeah. And I think, a quote, there's a friend of mine, and I'm going to use an employer quote that you'll enjoy, but I think it applies to just general life. He said, what I wanted was employees and what I got was people, right? So what I wanted was clients and what I got was people, right? It's so just through, I feel like these people who dogmatically stick to the same sort of things for years, you're just not paying attention. You're just not listening to your clients, because just through sheer mass effect of working with over 1,700 people, over a 15-year period, I learned that it's okay to have in your mind what might be the best thing in terms of, like, really getting down to the minutia and stuff. For 99% of people, it doesn't fucking matter, because it doesn't matter. Maybe nutrient timing matters a little bit. I don't give a fuck for my, mom with 4 kids who's a client. I just want her to find a way to get pretty close every day, right? If she does that and she's compliant over time, there's going to be results, right?
Yeah.
But I think people get really hung up on the small stuff, and they end up majoring in the minors, and they don't even take care of the stuff that's actually really important. And that's a lot of my education, Dane, in the courses. One of the first things I talk about is, like, when we're talking about this stuff, I'm going to talk about this in order of importance. You know what I mean? Because it's very important to understand not everything is of equal importance. You know, people get hung up on, you know, like the carbohydrate to fat ratio in their diet. What's the best ratio? And it's like if you're hitting your protein and calories, you are 95% of the way there, maybe more, you know, for body composition, that is. But
let
people
me
get
ask you,
so hung up on
let me
little
ask
stuff.
you a question then. If, you know, and obviously one of the things that you've touched base on today is the importance of, you know, learning from good sources that are giving you sound and scientific and you know, evidence-based information, which I agree with. What about, and we've kind of just touched on it, the art of coaching? Because, you know, and I'm sure you've experienced this too. I've met a lot of smart people in my life that are far smarter than me when it comes to nutrition or training. Even when I was actively practicing as a coach, I wasn't the smartest coach. What I was good at was actually coaching. And you know, there wasn't any course I could do on that. You know, there wasn't. I didn't go and do a degree. I mean, actually, there are courses, but I didn't go and do a degree in you know, human behavioral science. So what would be your recommendation to coaches out there that it's like, you know, I always encourage coaches now, it's like you've got to learn your craft. You know, if you want to get results with clients, you need to understand nutrition, you need to understand training, but then you also need how to take that and translate that as a coach.
Well, and that's why I spent so much time in like the online course we have now, the Science of Nutrition and Training the Physique Athlete. Was part of that was dedicated to just talking about how to interact with your clients. I think that's something that's totally missed on a lot of different courses. And one of the things I said that I think really, you know, when I was giving the seminars in Sydney, where I saw so many light bulbs just go off, was I said, you know, two things that are crucial for coaching are empathy and accountability. Okay. What I mean by empathy is when a client has screwed up, if you don't handle that right, you're not going to get results for that client. Like if you're browbeating them over screwing up, first off, they're not going to tell you if they screw up again, or they're going to like downplay it. And second, they have already likely beaten themselves up way more than you have. Now, I have had some clients in the past where I did kind of have to give them a swift kick in the ass every once in a while. But also like that was me understanding their personality and that they needed that tough love and that tough love was good for them. I've also had here's the other secret. You can't treat every client the same. You can't. Not everybody's the same. I've had clients who respond very well to that tough love. I've also had clients with low self-esteem, very low self-confidence. And if I gave them that tough love, it would just crush their souls. You know what I mean? You almost have to baby them. But you still need to find some variance of empathy and accountability. So the empathy portion is like, let's say somebody, you know, blew out their diet on one night. What I would typically do is I would say, hey, like they had work stress, they fought with their spouse, their kids were driving them crazy, whatever. I say, hey, it's okay. I understand, you know, like I've been there. Here's where insert example of me doing pretty much the same damned thing, right? Here's what has happened to me, or
well,
here's where I've seen it.
That gives them permission.
Right.
It gives them permission to feel okay with it too.
It also improves their confidence that their coach isn't going to just like kick them when they're down. So there's that portion of it. But I'm also, if they've done that, I also can't let them off the hook, right? I can't just let them, because it can't be nothing is my fault, right?
Yeah.
So there's a great struggle going on in culture right now. And there are some people who kind of want to make it so that there is no accountability for anybody. Nobody has to be responsible for anything. It's kind of like this determinism thing where like, you know, you're just your trauma and experiences and you don't have control. There is no free will.
I know where you want to go with this.
Yeah, there is no free will. There is no free will, you know, so nobody should be responsible for anything. I don't think that's a useful construct. Even if it's true, I don't think it's a useful construct to tell people, okay? What I believe, and I guess because there's no way to falsify or prove this hypothesis, I think that there are things that happen in our life that make us more prone to certain triggers, certain things, like our life experiences, of course. But I also believe that we have free will. In terms of we can feel those emotions, we can have those triggers. We also have some control over how we respond, right? So so in the accountability portion, What I may say to somebody who had that experience, I say, okay, I get it. This was rough. Okay, how did this happen? All right, where did you feel like it was going off the rails? Okay, here are the steps we can do so that we learn from this, so that this doesn't happen again, or at least it doesn't happen in this way. Sometimes it's like a puzzle where you got to figure it out, right? Whether it's, somebody, I had a person who was a big night eater, right? Like sleep eater, like would wake up and not real and go into the kitchen the next day and realize, holy shit, I ate a lot and I didn't realize I did it. We put zip ties on their refrigerator, right? Like that was that,
Oh my God.
right? I mean, the next day they got up, cut them off, and that stopped it. It wasn't them trying to be a glutton. They just literally didn't realize they were doing it, and so that was an easy way to fix it, right? So but we had to play with a few things. I was like, well, try to lock your door, like your bedroom door, from the interior, right? Because if you have to unlock it, maybe that will snap you back into consciousness about what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Some people, like I've used Post-its before when I've like kind of emotionally ate or whatever. Like I would put Post-its on stuff like, do you really want to eat this? Like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now, some people might view that as disordered, but I think that that's just, being conscious and like, again, that's not going to work for everybody. It's like fitting a puzzle. In the accountability portion, then I might say something like, I understand it's been very hard. You've been really stressed out, but keep in mind that, there's a lot of people who deal with similar stresses who do find a way to make this work. And so I know it's been hard. I know whether your life's been hard or the week's been hard or whatever. I promise you somebody's came from worse and done better. Okay.
Yeah.
So the down part of that is it hurts our ego, but the good part of that is it's possible, right?
Yeah.
You're not a unicorn. You can make this happen. Right. And I find that for most people, I say responsibility and accountability is it's empowering. I say, don't look at responsibility and accountability as harming your ego. Look at it as being empowered, that you do have control. That's your control.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So I find that when it's presented that way, in that sort of manner, where there's no judgments from either side, but hey, listen, and I've said this to people, I've said, I just want you to be happy. As a client, that's all I care about, is whether or not you're happy with my coaching service. I don't care if you're 5% body fat or 25% body fat. I want you to be happy. So if you're happy at 25% body fat, hey, live and let live. I have no judgments over that. But if you're at 25% body fat and you want to go to 15, there's going to have to be some sort of sacrifice, right? Like something is going to change. And if it doesn't change, then you're not going to change.
Yeah.
And so I find that when it's presented like that, when there's no judgment and it's not this super fit person who's, judging me for, not being super fit, it lets people's guards down. And now you've humanized yourself. You've also provided some structure and accountability for them. They want to make you proud. Like that is a crucial aspect of coaching, actually. You need to want your client to make you proud. That
You
is
have to feel
so
trust
important.
too as well.
Yes, that is so important. That is leadership capital, as Jocko Willink likes to say. You want to make them want to make you proud. Every coach I've had that I've done well with has been somebody I wanted to make proud, and I didn't want to disappoint. Right. So that's I think that's a big benefit, and stuff that's really not discussed. You go to a PT course. I don't know for sure, but I can't imagine that. I've never heard of anybody talking that.
We do, but to be honest, I think the only reason we do, kind of like with you, is that we've had the in the trenches of experience of working with clients for so many years. Think about it. When you came into the industry, your science background would have been your strength rather than your coaching skill set. That comes through experience. So I think it's because a lot of the stuff that is out there these days, it's like you get somebody that's done a science degree, and then rather than going and actually applying it as a coach, they write up the course curriculum, but they're missing the human interaction component. And, at the end of the day, you made that quote before, I wanted employees, but I got people. Well, duh, you want clients, you're going to get people.
It's like when 99% of the people who actually come up to be a PT don't actually succeed past the first year because they're not probably fit to be a coach, where you have to be a human too. You have to have humanistic qualities. You have to be able to be part psychologist too. Like that's the missing part of the equation. Everyone can talk about training. Everyone can talk about the lats and being engaged, but not anyone can touch on a human level and go, I actually understand where you're coming from. I actually know why you had that piece of cake or why you didn't have that piece of cake, because you actually have your eye on the prize or wherever it might be. So I think that's like the big thing that you actually touched upon, and I think is really, really special, because it's what's missing in this industry, where people forget that we are all humans and people make mistakes. And the one thing people make a lot of mistakes on seems to be nutrition too. It's the one part of the puzzle that a lot of people
Hey,
fall down upon.
Yeah, and I think you just gotta love people as well. Like people might think I don't, but I love people. I love helping people. Like that's the core at what my business vision is. We did our vision statement, our mission statement, and the core of it is we just want to help a lot of people. That's it. And I think if you don't have that as your core value, you're going to really struggle as a PT. You might make some quick money. But I think that if you truly want to be good and not just make money, I mean, get results and have your clients be long-term invested and really love what you do, you've got to really want to, like, your main thing has to be, I want to help as many people as possible. And I put up a post the other day where I said, be married to the result. Don't be married to the method. And I think that's why I've never become dogmatic about anything, because I don't give a shit if it's low carb that works for somebody. If it helps them lose whatever weight, hell yeah. Like, I became known as a flexible dieting guy only because that's kind of what I liked and popularized, because before that, it really wasn't, people didn't talk about that as a methodology of losing weight.
Yeah.
But I don't care if somebody doesn't want to do flexible dieting. That doesn't bother me one iota. Why would I care? I just want them to get results, and whatever does that, awesome.
Yeah. Is that kind of why you developed Carbon in terms of the vision statement and why you wanted to help people? Do you want to talk a little bit about that and why you developed it?
Boy, do I. I can't take full credit for it. It was, so this was a collaborative effort with myself, my wife, Holly, our friend, Keith Crocker, who's a registered dietitian, and our two developers who are also business partners in this venture. But yeah, we have 5. So basically, just let me step back before I get too into it. There's a lot of calorie trackers out there. You got MyFitnessPal, you got all these things, but none of them actually coach you. And when I say coach you, I mean make dynamic changes based on how your body is responding to what you've been doing. So we really tried to automate the coaching process. Now, there's certain things you just can't automate. Like, I don't think a robot's ever going to replace the human interaction. But for people who are pretty darn good in terms of, they don't require a lot of emotional support, they just need some structure. I think it's a great option, especially for, $10 US per month. Well, actually less. So basically, it's an app where you go in, you put in your information in terms of a few details about, your weight, your body fat, like some other metrics. And then you put in your goal, you put in the rate at which you want your goal, like in terms of your rate of weight loss. And we keep it constrained. We don't let you like put in too much or too little. Same thing for weight gain, muscle gain, or reverse dieting, whatnot. And then it generates a plan in terms of your macronutrient intake. Mm-hmm. And then it will adjust that plan as you check in weekly with the coach. And by the coach, I mean basically the coaching system. Yeah. And we've had some amazing results so far. And we've got over, we actually just hit 25,000 active subscribers last week, which is pretty incredible. And that's in less than a year with basically word of mouth, other than just me, putting it on Instagram and whatnot. We haven't done any paid advertising. So that goes to show how powerful it's been. And I think one of the big things is we wanted to make it an app that anybody could use. We didn't want it to be a flexible dieting app necessarily. So you can certainly do it with that. But if you go to, so we have 5 different basic dietary preferences. So we have plant-based, we have balanced, we have low fat, we have low carb, and we have ketogenic.
Mm-hmm.
2 of those 5 options are, 40% of those options are some variation of low carb. So people that say I hate low carb, I don't hate low carb. There's like, why would I make it 40% of my app? And even within each of those dietary preferences, there's ranges that you can adjust your protein, carbohydrate, and fat to suit your personal preference. Because what we didn't want ever to happen is somebody to be like, well, I would love to do this, but I hate the way I'm eating. We wanted everybody to be able to say, I love the way I eat right now, but still get results. And so it was about providing that structured flexibility. And I think that that's a key term, structured flexibility. It's kind of like government, right? If you people who are like super anti-government, it's like, okay, well, the extreme of that is anarchy, right? So that's like ultimate flexibility. Well, that ain't real great. That ain't real great. You don't really want that. But the other extreme end of that is totalitarianism. Also not good, right?
Yeah.
And so the extreme end of that in dieting is set meal plans with all rigidity and no flexibility, and those aren't sustainable typically either. Now, where you fall on that spectrum, so I always say, with not to put my politics out there, but I always say, any political question or any problem, I would like to approach that from how can we resolve this, maintaining the maximum amount of freedom with the minimal government intervention, right? But maybe for one topic, that's like closer to totalitarianism, whereas another thing, it'd be closer to, like a libertarianism, whatever. It probably should be individually problem dependent.
Yeah.
Same thing for nutrition. Some people require much more structure, usually, especially when they're kind of getting into it. Think of it like training wheels, right?
Yeah.
So where you fall on that spectrum is going to depend on, where you're at and what your individual personal preference is. For some people, like a lot of people will compare our app to, for example, Renaissance periodization. Renaissance periodization is very much more eat these foods at these times. Now, for some people, that's going to be great because they need that rigid structure in order to really get their feet off the ground. But for some people, that's going to be way too much structure and way too much rigidity. And whereas ours, I like to think that we have a really good blend of both. We've got enough structure to allow you to feel like you're not all over the place, but also enough flexibility to where you can truly enjoy it and make it your own. So that's kind of why we came up with it. And I feel like it obviously, like servicing, now we have products that can help people at every level, right? Because you'd have to be pretty darn broke not to be able to afford $10 US per month, right? So if you're making it a priority, and that's the big thing. Like we really wanted this to be something that, people could afford. And so many people have said to us, I would pay 10 times this for what you're offering. But I wanted this to be something that one day we could have millions of users on. And that's our goal.
Well, talk to us then. We're in 2021 now. Obviously, I know of a few exciting projects you've got coming up this year. Obviously, there's the Physique Coaching Academy, etc. But what does 2021 look like for you?
Yeah, so we actually, very interesting. We had our old personal assistant quit late last year and kind of threw us into a spin because he quit pretty unexpectedly. And no shade or anything. Like he decided he wanted to go. His mother was sick and he wanted to go live with her. So no shade or anything like that. But it made us really step back, and because we had to start doing some of those small tasks that we'd been out of. And we noticed that there were so many problems in the business, the BioLayne business, in terms of our team of coaches and whatnot, and so many inefficiencies and so too much flexibility and not enough rigidity, essentially. And we've got a new executive assistant, Sam, and she has made a huge difference. So this is somebody who's, she was an assistant in Manhattan with like Tom Ford makeup and Estee Lauder. So this was like think Devil Wears Prada. And just her coming in and starting to like check off the list of things that need to be done has just been a huge game changer. So we're actually in the process of almost like completely restructuring that business and how we do things. And I think it's going to it's costing us a lot of time and energy right now, but I think it's going to set us up for long-term success.
I'd call it, it's a build phase. You know, I think
Yes.
it happens, you know, even with us, we kind of went into a build phase towards the back end of last year. I think it's, you know, part of business. You're going to go through cycles where you grow, you get stuck, you need to retweak before you grow again.
Yeah,
And
it's
sometimes those
painful.
sticking,
Change
yeah,
is painful.
and sometimes those sticking points come via surprise, as you just mentioned, or sometimes they just come. But I think, you know, it's business to me is a good kind of reflection on life, because you're always going to get thrown curveballs. And, you know, it really just comes down to, how do you let them define you? Do you let it knock you down, or do you get back up and you walk around it and keep pushing forward? So I can relate.
Yeah, and I mean, like I was so frustrated like a few weeks ago. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna dissolve this and do, to focus on this. But I didn't really mean that. It's just, it's like growing pains as an adolescent, right? Like you actually hurt because you're
Yep.
growing, right? And then if you think about the things in your personal life that made you the most personal growth, they were the most painful. Dane, you and I have both been through, divorces that were
Yep.
very difficult, and
And
but
public.
and public. And you know what? My God, the amount I learned in that period of time, like I said, if I knew then what I know now,
Yeah.
right?
I'm just
And
sitting back taking notes, like, okay, do not get divorced.
well, not
We're
necessarily don't
experts
get
in this.
divorced, but you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes in order to know that, or in order to wake you up enough to where you take notice and you actually do grow as a person, it takes a very painful experience, right? So that's I think that's the key. Is like I heard something, and I think it was one of the founders of Facebook said, you know, don't even try to avoid making mistakes. Like that is just
Yeah,
going
no,
to
embrace
happen.
them.
Mm,
Just learn
Embrace
from,
them.
like, don't go out and purposely try to make mistakes, but like if they happen, just learn from it. And I think that's one thing that I've been relatively good at doing. Sometimes it's taken a few, in terms to see a
Mm.
trend and me go, oh, maybe I'm the common denominator here.
yeah.
I think that's a big thing. Being that, that's a big thing. I've got an ego like anybody else. People say, oh, I don't have
Yeah.
an ego. Bullshit. Like if you don't have an ego, then you don't actually care and you're not going to be motivated. Like I always tell somebody, like, show me somebody who says they live stress-free and I'll show you a fucking loser. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
People, say, "Oh, you live near the water. It must be so no stress." I'm like, I live near the water to balance my stress.
yeah. Yeah, well, you had a really, I know last year, like it was really difficult for you. Like you kind of had to have a whole personal remake of, your life.
Yep. Yeah.
And part of
But
that
as you were
was,
saying, like, growth comes through pain. I think that in reflection, like those most painful, because I think, when the emotion is there and you feel like, giving up or quitting, even how you said a few weeks ago, you're like, oh, you're in that headspace. That was a good headspace to be in
Mm,
retrospect, because it's triggered you to achieve a new level of action.
yeah, I think, I tell people like, don't quit or start things on an emotion, right?
mhm.
Yeah.
If you're still feeling that way, months and years after you originally felt that emotion, then it's time to revamp, right? But it's
Yeah.
like training. Like I'll give a great example. I'm not always motivated to train. I've had days, weeks, months where I have not been motivated to train, but it always comes back. The love for it, the passion for it always comes back. And so as long as it keeps coming back, I'm not going to quit it just because I had a bad day or a bad week or a bad month, right?
Yeah.
I think that's very important. So that's how I looked at the business too. I'm like, I still have a passion to help people. Like, I still think having a team of coaches is super important. So this is something I'm passionate about. I'm going to keep grinding away at it. So that's been the main focus early on. Obviously, like building up Physique Coaching Academy, which is the project that Clean Health, myself, Dr. Bill Campbell are working on, which is I think it's going to be a complete and utter game changer for the entire fitness industry. Just from the perspective of there is nothing out there right now that is body composition focused. You've got personal training certifications, which are focused in terms of just training, strength training or hypertrophy or whatever. You've got nutrition certifications like your precision nutritions and those sorts of things that are focused on nutrition, but just overall nutrition and like different, vibes. This is going to be strictly for, how do we make somebody improve their body composition, lose body fat, build muscle, not necessarily at the same time, but, just that being the goal. There's nothing out there specifically for that. And so I think that,
and definitely nothing that's at a diploma level qualification too.
Right. And I think that when you've got two people like myself and Bill Campbell, who have a good following in the industry, Bill is an actual research scientist who is a professor at a university, and you've got me who's coached over 1,700 people. I think
Bill's
there's
great.
going to be
Bill's
excellent.
He's good value.
I think there's going to be some real amazing synergism there, and I think that people are going to see it in a very premium product. So that's obviously like at the top of my list of things I want to accomplish in this year is get that done. I'm kind of having to clear some other things out of the way before that becomes a focus, so I can make it a focus. But yeah, I've almost done with one of the modules, and I'm like looking back, and as I'm like looking at, I'm like, nope, needs this. Nope, needs this. And it's like, it's kind of like when I was writing Fat Loss Forever. If I had a question about whether or not I should include it, I just put it in, because I'm like, I don't want to get like, what am I saving it for? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm not saving it for anything. This is the thing. So yeah, I'm super excited about that. That's a big one. Obviously continuing to grow Carbon, huge deal. And then also we're revamping the BioLayne website itself, which has our workout builder, which is a training template subscription service. So we're revamping that, and we're adding a research review to that. So for our members that are already paying, they're not going to pay a single cent more, and they're going to get a monthly research review added to what they're getting right now, and using that to try to bring in new members, obviously. So myself and my employee, James Longstrom, who has a master's from Bill Campbell's lab, we will review five studies every month that are relevant to people who are interested in body composition and health, and break it down in a manner that is palatable for the average person or average PT or average coach. So I'm really excited about that. I think that's a product that there's already some out there. You know, you've got like Mass, and you've got Alan Argon's research review and a few others, but I think at the price point we're bringing it out at and the quality that's going to be there, I think we're going to be extremely competitive, and a lot of people are going to love it.
Awesome. Well, I think, for a lot of our fit pros out there, guys, there's a vast array of different kind of offerings that you can, touch base with Layne on. It's biolayne.com to find out anything and everything Layne, and obviously his social media handles. But
I'm so sorry. I just completely omitted our supplement line.
Oh,
so
yes.
we also
plug away.
Yeah. We also launched Outwork Nutrition, which honestly, I have been so pleasantly surprised by that. My first foray into the supplement industry didn't do so hot. And I was kind of like, it was funny. I was talking about it on Instagram one day back in 2018, I want to say, early 2018. And this guy reached out to me, and he was like, hey, would you ever consider doing it again? He's like, I've started a few brands in this industry. He's like, I really believe that you could have something and have it be really successful if you had the right partner and the right, business structure and just be set up to thrive. And I was like, yeah, sure. I would be interested in it. And man, that guy has been such a stud business partner, really has. Like, usually end up complaining about business partners. I'm very fortunate. He's been an absolute stud. And we again, no paid marketing, just kind of posting about it, like sprinkling it throughout the week. And it has sold about double what I thought it would. So I have been very pleasantly surprised so far. And I can't wait to see what happens once we get on Amazon, start marketing, all that kind of stuff. I'm very, very excited.
That's amazing.
Cool.
Lots of exciting stuff to come for 2021 in Layne.
Lots of stuff.
Well, thank you so much, Layne, for all your time. We've covered all things from cutting through the BS on social media, why you got started, your exciting projects. Cannot wait. I think the listeners have had an earful today, but an earful of amazing content. So thank you again for your time, Layne.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.